We are back on track one. Hello, everybody, again. I hope you have an interesting day here, interesting things, and meet interesting people so far. Our next guest is Andreas Blum, as you can see. He leads the data and AI consulting practice of Unit 8. This is a leading Swiss service provider in the area of data, AI, and analytics. Andreas will now present you how to turn data into value. He will present a concrete case study on AI model governance. Please, Andreas Blum, welcome.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, before I start, I have to make two confessions. I'm not a data scientist. I'm a Master of Business Administration, so-called MBA. Therefore, I'm even more happy about the privilege to present here today at the Swiss Data Science Conference. So great, no one seems to be leaving the room yet. And secondly, very sorry to be probably the last person between now and your lunch break, so I'll really try to finish on time. I'll be talking today about how we helped a leading Swiss reinsurance company to implement a best-in-class AI governance and also the lessons you can draw from that for your own organizations. So who are we as Unit 8? We are a Swiss consulting company in the data and analytics space. We implement customized AI use cases and data and analytics platforms, and we have around 100 employees. We've been around for 5 years, and so far we executed more than 130 projects. We also have a small team of strategy consultants who support our clients on topics such as use case identification, data strategy, and also governance, which brings me to the topic of today. So why would you want to adopt an AI governance? First of all, there's internal pressures. There's an ever-expanding user base of analytics in the organization. There's also a gap between what organizations would like to do in terms of AI governance and what they actually have at the moment. Then there is all sorts of external pressures. Competitive pressures to quickly adopt new AI use cases are rising. There's also more and more attention by regulators, for example, the upcoming EU AI Act, and also the media and the public are looking much more closely now if anything goes wrong with AI models. So how do you get this governance right? First of all, there's some homework you should do before getting started. We recommend to look at data governance first, because it doesn't make sense to implement model governance when the data on which these models run is not yet under control. It's also important to get buy-in of stakeholders across all organizational levels, and you need to ensure you have the sufficient resources available. And we do recommend a healthy dose of pragmatism before getting started. Now, what are the key ingredients of a good AI model governance? In our experience, it's people, it's processes, and it's technology. So it's actually relatively basic, but each of these three elements need to be considered. I'm now going to talk about a case study, how we helped Swiss Re implement AI data model governance. This started around 2 years ago and finished earlier this year. We started our project with the joint development of some advanced analytics principles. These principles cover topics such as value creation, responsible AI, or also continuous monitoring. Here you see the full principles. Now, I'm not going to cover each of them in detail, but would like to give you some pointers. It's important that you regard these principles as some North Star that guide your AI governance for the organization. It's also important that you get the organizational buy-in on these principles and really consider all your stakeholders, which would be your management, your employees, your clients, and also society in general. And then these principles should be as general as possible and as specific as necessary, because you don't want to have to update them every 6 months. We then defined 5 governance roles, which each have a clear responsibility across the analytics lifecycle. For example, there's the project sponsor, which in our view should be a senior management member who holds the ultimate accountability for the project. He or she doesn't need to know all the details, but is accountable. There's also the model owner, who should come from the business, because the business will be the end user of the model. And then there's roles such as the model auditor and the model steward. With that, we try to introduce a 4I principle and some quality gates. And the model steward is also, in a way, a technical sparring partner to the model owner. We then developed this life cycle process across each stages of a model life cycle. It's 6 stages. And for every stage, there is actually quite complex documentation and sign-off requirements. So this is a highly simplified version. It all starts with scoping the project when the model is also centrally registered. It then goes on through the processing, the model development, and the evaluation stage. After the evaluation stage, there is a decision gate where you can either decide to deploy the model or to go back and refine the model and then evaluate again, or you can also completely drop the model. And then finally, the model is being deployed and monitored while it is in production, and there's also a continuous improvement loop. Now, a key building block of this governance process, which is part of the scoping stage, is actually this materiality risk assessment framework. So this is partly confidential, and Swiss Re asked us to blur out some of the details. But essentially, there's 3 materiality dimensions which we assess, which are automation level, which are business as usual criticality, and which is legal and reputational impact. And depending on how you score on each of these dimensions, your model is either classified as low risk or high risk. And the model sponsor needs to sign off the final materiality assessment. And it also means that if your model is high risk, there's going to be considerably more stringent governance requirements. So this is, in a way, a risk-adjusted governance approach. Now, as the final piece, as the technology component, we develop a customized model catalog, which allows the registration and tracking of the models across the entire life cycle. This was, in fact, built on the Palantir Foundry platform. And it also has notifications for all the roles involved, so they will know which models they are responsible for, and when there is something that they have to act on. There's also some tracking of model metadata for auditory and also for regulatory purposes. Now, what was the impact that we had with this project for Swiss Re? I think, first of all, we gave Swiss Re some principles to guide the AI model development. We also introduced quality assurance and risk mitigation principles for the AI model with this risk-adjusted governance approach. And also, probably one of the key things is that now there is a central repository for all analytics models, like one central place, and therefore no models just popping up somewhere with like key people not being aware of them. Now, what you see here on the left is actually it's a photo of our project team. So you see it's been like a real project done by real people with also real impact. And I'd just like also to share some key takeaways with you. So I think it's important to really get started now, because this whole process took us 1.5 years. It's also very important to get a really cross-functional coalition to make this successful. And don't forget the 3 aspects of people, process, and technology. And I would like to briefly focus on the people dimension, because there's an important change management component. It's not sufficient to have a great tool and a great process if no one is using it in the end and no one is aware of it. That's why it's important really to get this organizational buy-in. Also, communication of different levels is important. Training is important. And lastly, it's also important that you have the right expertise, which you can either have in-house, and you really need quite a few different disciplines, or also you can ask for external support to assist you on this challenge. So now I'm coming to the conclusion. I don't know if we have time for a lot of questions still left, If not, I'm going to be around in the break. Also, feel free to drop me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd like to thank you very much for giving 10 minutes of your valuable time to a non-data scientist.